Welcome back, everybody. This is episode 16 of BQChats, and today we have Dylan Mallas. Hey, Dylan.
Hey, everybody. Hey, Philip.
So we've been doing our question breakdown videos. We've been doing multiples, 10s, 20s, and 30s, and we just finished that literally 3 minutes ago. And I was just like, hey, let's go ahead and let's do a podcast and get to know you a little better. And I even haven't heard a lot of your story, your quizzing story. And so I thought it would be good for us to jump into that. But first of all, I did just mention those question breakdown videos. Those are only available on YouTube. So if I have people that are only on the podcast side of things, and you're just like, where's BQ Chats been? We have been putting some material or some videos out on YouTube because there's a visual aspect of the videos, and we're displaying these verses that we're talking about and these questions. So if you haven't seen those, please check them out. I hope they're helpful to our coaches and quizzers. So, Dylan, you were a big part of that and helping with that. And the reason I asked you to do that is because you're so good with questions and you're so good at teaching your quizzers how to interrupt and how to hit. And I've seen them grow so much from your teaching.
Only they've listened.
If only they listened. But you have great kids. We love your kids, and it's great to see them doing so well this year. So for people that I'll just give a spiel, you're from Oak Creek, Wisconsin. I assume born and raised, right?
Yeah, I lived in the general area my whole life, yeah.
And we met, was it 2 years ago?
3.
3? 2 or 3 years ago, you guys came down
3.
3 years ago.
It was GLC in 2017.
You guys came down to Urbana, Illinois.
No, it was in Salem.
No, it was Urbana.
No, we came the next year after that.
I feel like we met in Urbana.
It was a Wendy's in Salem, Illinois.
Oh,
I know
yeah.
where it was.
That's what it was. I got it mixed up. Okay, so Urbana was the next year. You're right.
Yeah.
So we met in a Wendy's at the TOC in Salem, Illinois. That was where we met. Gosh. Yep. Okay, and I saw you, and we happened to go to the same Wendy's, and it's all our quizzing folks, and it's
there's all like 3 restaurants there, so
shout out to Salem.
It's a very good Wendy's.
So I saw you guys, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I know them, but I didn't know you guys. I just familiar faces from quizzing, and well,
at that point, I had been primarily coaching experience, and you had been coaching intermediate.
Right, we had kind of missed each other.
I had kind of a team shift in the middle of the year that year, so I ended up moving after Extrav. I went down to coach intermediate.
Gotcha.
Where I had been coaching experience.
Because you coached Ben Contino before that.
Both of the Contino brothers, yeah.
Both the Contino brothers, and then in experience, and then after they aged out, you were coaching Ben Hornack, and Andrew, who you still coach now.
Yeah, right. I coached them in juniors too, but
gotcha.
I've been with them since they were 8. It's been a long time.
8.
My last year of quizzing was their first year of quizzing, and I coached them at Extrav and a couple other tournaments that year. So it's been a long time.
I wonder if that's the longest running coach. I mean, you didn't coach them every year though, right?
No.
So, I've been with Sherwin and Ave since they were 10, and Ave took a year off. So it'll be 9 years with Sherwin and 8 years with Ave by the time it's all said and done, which it's a great run. I'm blessed to have a quiz coordinator at our church that just has been like, you know what, stay with them. Y'all have a great thing going. Keep it up. You know, he did that when they moved up to seniors, and I'm thankful for it because it's been a blast. But anyway, back to you. We met. I saw you and your kids at Wendy's, and I was like, oh God, we have to meet them. And you guys came all the way from Oak Creek, so I wanted you guys to feel welcome. And we just sat down and started chatting and got to know each other, and the whole crew got to hang out. And I'm blessed to have kids that don't meet very many strangers, and that they do their best to try and make everybody feel a part and to bring everybody in and just goof off. And that's what we did. and it's been great. And then the next year you came
Yeah.
to Urbana. That's what I was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Next year
Yeah.
you came to Urbana, and we continued, and I got to know you better, and I realized that you are one of those coaches that cares just about as much as I do. Absolutely as much as I do, and you really do care a lot about your kids, and you care a lot
Mm-hmm.
about quizzing, and you pour your heart and soul into this, which I can relate to a lot. And there are a lot of coaches out there that do that,
Mm-hmm.
but it's great to see what you do. And we do things a lot. We do things very different, you and I.
Mm-hmm.
But it's I've learned
I'm a little
some.
more intense,
Yeah,
that's for sure.
we do things very different, but I've really learned a lot from you,
Well, thank you.
and
I've learned from you too.
and I feel like we respect each other. We do things different,
Mm-hmm.
and both seem to work. So it's
Mm-hmm.
just it's nice to have somebody to bounce ideas off of and talk to about
Yeah.
quizzing, and we talk about stat stuff, and we talk about old times, and like some people talk about MJ versus Jordan. No, we talk about the this 90s quizzer versus this 2000s quizzer.
You usually disagree with me, but I was there and you weren't. So
Well, I wasn't there, so I don't know all the history, but you are, for anyone, you probably have the most extensive Bible quizzing encyclopedia of knowledge. Usually I can be
I
like,
don't know. I think Chad's got me beat, but
oh yeah, Chad's got quite the
he's older than
encyclopedia.
me. So
True, but either one of you, I could text either one of you with some random like, "Hey, who was third place all tournament and nationals in 2007? You have 30 seconds," and both of you would be like, "Oh, that was so and so."
that's your BS. No, I'm serious. That's your BS.
Oh gosh, you see what I mean, and that's impressive. That is impressive, and I wasn't around during all those times, so it's nice to have people that like just to chat about that stuff and learn about how things are different now than they were then, and how
Mm-hmm.
cuisine's changed, and I think it's all good stuff. But
Yeah.
that's how we met, and we've gotten to be friends, and our kids have gotten to be friends, and we've had a blast getting to know each other and learning from each other. I hope you've learned something from me. I've learned a lot
I
from you.
have. You're way nicer than me. It's okay. I've learned to be nicer.
But I thought it would be fun. And you've never really told me even like your quizzing story, and I asked you if you wanted to share, and you said yeah. So here we are, and I would love to hear your quizzing story.
All right. Like just how I got started, or
Just yeah, whatever you want to share, and how you
okay.
got started, and your younger days, and what
Yeah.
quizzing meant to you, and yeah, just tell us about it.
So I quizzed for 10 years. All of them have been at my home church in Oak Creek. I did quiz a couple of years, like had other people join our team, or like I was still going to my church, but quizzing. I quizzed with the Sheboygan Falls Church 1 year, and I quizzed with the Appleton Church 1 year. But other than that, it was all at my home church. I started quizzing in the fall of 2001. So Romans in 2002 was my first year of quizzing. Um, and I know some people say like, well, my mom made me do it. My mom kind of made me do it, but my mom told me what it was. Um, and my sister was really excited to quiz. But at the time, our church had this rule that all quizzers needed to have the Holy Ghost in order to be able to quiz. Um, and so I didn't at whatever I was, 8 or 9. But my mom went and talked to our pastor, and Brother Tamil made an exception that he was going to let me quiz because clearly I wanted to if we were asking this question. So I did. I joined quizzing. The first year was interesting. I had no clue what was going on. Like, I don't remember if I was good or not, to be honest with you. No clue if I memorized all my material or not. Juniors was not my jam.
Yeah.
I was like, people see my expressions as a coach, like my facial expressions, and are I hear entertained by them.
you,
Um,
you wear it on your
tr-
sleeve a little bit. It's okay.
Trust me, it was way worse in juniors. I cried after literally every quiz. Whether we won or we lost, I cried after every single quiz for 3 years of or 4 years of juniors. How many years of juniors? Three. So for Romans, for Psalms, and for Doctrine One, I cried after every quiz,
Why do you think
and
that was?
I don't know, probably because like I didn't quiz out or something stupid. Um, but I was not. I mean, I was an okay junior quizzer, but um, I was not super aggressive, so I was a little on the slow side. Um, but I did learn to love cross-reference questions. I was afraid of them, but I learned to love them because my mom paid me $15 for every one I got right. And
Wow.
one tournament, I cleaned her out of like $150, and then that ended, and it never happened again. Um, but I loved cross reference questions. My problem was that I wasn't aggressive enough until the 30s. So if like I was just kind of sitting around until the 30s, like, oh, okay, if you give me a reread, I'll take it, and then I'll just come alive in the 30s.
Until the
Um,
money
but
questions.
but it's already locked most of the time by that point. But I never qualified for nationals and juniors. We were one spot away my last year. Um, I think there were three teams qualified in place four. But that was I never qualified in juniors. Um, then when I moved up to seniors, my first 3 years I didn't really work very hard. So nothing really happened. Like I didn't do very well. The first time I qualified for nationals was 2007. And I remember I that year was hard. With the material was Heroes of the Faith, and people didn't love it. But the word count was very, very high that year. I remember them saying that the junior word count in 2007 was higher than the experienced word count for the next year.
Wow.
So it was a very, very dense material. And I did okay. I don't think I finished the material that year, but that year was interesting for me because it was the first year that I wasn't like the person that had all the pressure on them on the like I didn't have all the pressure on me on the team. I became a 10-point person, and that was a really weird experience for me, and I did not like it. So the next year I worked a lot harder in 2008. Um, and that year um, we qualified again for nationals, but I had some health stuff that summer. I ended up having surgeries, so we didn't attend nationals. But 2009, I feel like was my last 3 years of quizzing were my best years of quizzing for sure. Um, I remember being very happy in 2009 when we quizzed Luke. We went, um, so we mentioned I coached Nick Contino. I also quizzed with him. That's an interesting experience going from being someone's teammate to being their coach. It's an interesting like role shift.
I
Um,
bet.
but we went to a tournament in Indiana, and I remember like Indiana had done very very well at nationals the year before. In 2008, they had a team place second at nationals, a team place I believe either seventh or ninth, but they had two teams trophy from their district, and so we went and um, I remember just being like nervous that like we weren't going to perform as well as we wanted, and we took second at their tournament in Indiana and beat one of those two teams that had trophied the year before, and that was when I kind of felt like, oh, okay, I can compete with the teams that are working hard, that are doing very well. Um, so that was the first year in my quiz career that my team won state finals, and that was a big deal. I felt really good about that. But the interesting thing was I was 16 at this point, and I still didn't have the Holy Ghost, even though I had been quizzing for all of those years. And that year in 2009, we went to nationals, and we did okay. Won a couple of quizzes. I remember one quiz in particular where we went into overtime, and my teammate had aired out and literally had negative 50 points.
Oh my goodness.
Literally had negative 50. But he was 12. It was his first year at senior nationals. He was terrified. We ended up somehow pulling that quiz out in overtime. How that happens when someone has negative 50 on the team, I don't know, but it did. Um, And nationals was really good. That was one of my favorite venues we've gone for nationals. That was in Nashville downtown. That was the Congress here as well. But after nationals, my teammate didn't stay for Congress, and so my mom was my coach at the time, and so she and the rest of the team went home, and I stayed on with her youth group. And Congress that year, um, I'd never been to Congress before, so it was a really neat, interesting experience for me. But I got the Holy Ghost at Congress that year, and I was literally quoting verses from that year's material as I got the Holy Ghost. It was like the ask and it shall be given you, seek and you shall find from Luke chapter 6.
Oh, wow.
And I was like quoting that over and over as I got the Holy Ghost. So quizzing definitely was the thing that kept me around. Um, I struggled and wavered a little bit in my teen years, and like not like I was doing bad things, but just questioning was is God real? Are people making this up? Like I had been seeking for the Holy Ghost since I was like 5, and it just hadn't happened. And I was like, are people making this up? Like, I don't, what is this? Um, and so I'd kind of given up a couple of years earlier, and I knew God was real, but I was questioning whether or not the Pentecostal experience was real. And so at Congress that year, obviously things changed, and um, it was interesting for me that after that, it was like I kind of came alive as a quizzer. Um,
Really?
and like I had never really performed well at a national level or out of the state, like done very, very well ever prior to that. Um, and so the next year I was in 2010 in Acts, I was more committed to knowing my material than I ever had been before. But I also just felt like more connected to the material than I had been before. I finished all of my material by Christmas that year. I finished all my
Wow.
material. Um, yeah.
Yeah, that's impressive.
I think Tanner Carroll still had me be finished in like September all the time. So I don't think it's that impressive.
Oh,
Um,
well, dude, I'm not gonna say anything about my kids at this point in time.
Different things work for different people. That was what ended up being the thing that really worked for me. So I knew my material, like I had all my material done, and like I mentioned before, we had never won state finals before, and that year we literally didn't lose a quiz in district in
Wow.
2010. So we went from like struggling to qualify for nationals and finally, won first at the end of 2009. And then we did not lose a quiz we didn't have a team come within 120 points of us in a single quiz
Wow.
the entirety of the quiz season. We had literally every quiz locked before the 30s in the district.
Wow.
Went to Extravaganza in Kansas City that year. We placed third, and I think I was first on the team. But that was the best we had ever done at a national level before. The first like recognition that I had ever had, and so that felt really good. I felt like we really gelled as a team that year.
And that was your what, 7th year quizzing?
That would have been my 9th year quizzing.
9th year of quizzing. That was the first time you truly felt like you like reached your potential, maybe?
Yeah, mm-hmm.
Wow. That's awesome.
I would say so. So then we went to nationals in 2010. Um, in St. Louis at the Renaissance Hotel. I remember us being in the like the penthouse suites up, like it was all the way at the top floor where we were quizzing. And if you went down to watch, because intermediates were on the bottom floor, and experience was upstairs. And if you were trying to go back and forth, you might not make it because those elevators were slow. Um, but we did very well at that tournament. Despite that I didn't always do very well, I never felt like I was like afraid of um, other teams. Like I expected to win even if we didn't. Um, but there was one quiz like that tournament. The only quiz I ever remember being like afraid, like of the other team, being really nervous. Um, and we were in trophy round at that point, and we were quizzing Louisiana 3, which was Caleb and Chloe Saucer. And I don't know why I was so like nervous about it. I think part of it was like Caleb had this great like quizzing pedigree. He had won nationals multiple times, and he had just been like on a roll in round two. Was just like getting like the first 820s and quizzing out. Like just he was quizzing super well, um, and had was just like blowing past really good teams. But also, I've always had this thing about like I have a hard time with ending people's quiz careers. And like I knew that if we won, it was his last quiz. And I felt kind of weird about that. And I literally don't remember anything from that quiz. Like
Really?
I just remember like sitting there, like I in the moment it was happening, I didn't know what was happening.
Hmm.
And so I remember my mom called the timeout on like question 17 or 18, and she was like, "Okay, so he aired out," and I was like, "What? I thought it was already locked and they won." Like I had no idea what was happening.
Really?
Somehow we pulled that quiz out, and I had no idea what was going on, which is very not like me.
Huh.
And I was just like spaced out in nowhere land, like not knowing what was going on. And I think a lot of people were surprised that we had beaten them. They were one of the favorites to win nationals that year. I believe they went undefeated at South Central Extrav that year and had done very well all year long.
Well,
Um,
oh yeah, I remember Caleb from my quizzing days,
mhm.
short lived, but yeah, him and Lauren quizzing together were a fantastic team,
Right,
obviously.
they're a great team. But that quiz just kind of like flew by me. But that's like the only time I remember being like afraid. We ended up finishing in fifth that year. I was on all tournament team at nationals, and that just it felt really really good. I don't like looking at pictures of it because my hair was so bad. Um, welcome to late late 2000s, early 2010. Um, but then my next year was my last year of quizzing, and um, I didn't perform as well as I would have liked. I did make all tournament at nationals, but we didn't, as a team, did not do all that well at Extrav or at nationals. I do remember at Extrav, my teammate almost threw up on Brother Faubert.
Oh wow.
Like she had really bad food poisoning, and in the middle, like we're quizzing at Extrav, and she buzzes in to take this question, and she like has to like put her hand over her mouth. And afterwards, I was like, "What was happening?" She was like, "I was not going to be the girl that projectile vomited on Brother Faubert."
Oh man, that would have been a
Um,
story.
but my last year didn't go exactly the way I planned, and that was difficult for me. I remember feeling like, and I understand the way last year quizzers feel when there's almost this like you're very cautious. Most last year quizzers I feel like are very cautious that there there's almost this like fear of getting things wrong because it may be the last question that you ever answer. Like, and you get caught up in this. Oh, that was my last January tournament. Oh, that was my last February tournament. Oh, that was
Right.
my last March tournament. That was my last extrav. That was my last state. And you're at your last nationals, and you're trying to like savor every moment through the whole year. But for me, anyways, I felt like I almost like didn't enjoy it because I was so caught up in it being the last of this and the last of that. Um, and I had a conversation with Megan Favorite her last year, and she kind of felt the same way. Like she was like, I cried after every tournament the whole year. Um, but and that was a really I had a hard time with it being my last quiz, and it was also my teammates' last quiz. So we were our whole team was last year quizzers. Um, so after like at Prayer and Share that year, I remember like Brother Folk are actually like praying for me about like how zealous I am about quizzing, and I have this like love for kind of the game part of quizzing, but that I needed to like see the other sides of quizzing and the value, and I did, but I think maybe I didn't put as much of an emphasis on the spiritual side of quizzing as I could have, and that's I think for all of us, that's a continual journey, and it certainly is for me. Um,
I
so I,
I was gonna say that I mean I can relate. It is hard for us people like you and me that are just love the game of it so much. But my wife is usually the one that keeps me in check. My wife is a very spiritually minded, very like she doesn't care about the game. She didn't quiz. She didn't. I mean, she
right.
cares because she cares about the kids, but she cares so much more about the spiritual side. So she always
Hmm.
balances me out, which I need. Um, but it's the most important thing, you know, and there's been things happening in our quiz programs the last few years that really have kind of punched us in the face to kind of
Hmm.
show like how important it really is and for us to keep perspective. But well, so do you feel like you changed after that
I
conversation you
do.
had with them?
I do. It was a gradual shift, I feel. Some of that was just, maturing that we do as we move from being a teenager into being an adult.
Right.
Um, but I'm really thankful that I was given the opportunity right away to move into coaching because I know not everyone has that same opportunity. Um, but part of the reason I love quizzing so much is that I really, really believe that um, God used quizzing to keep me around and to keep me in church because I don't know that I would be if um, quizzing hadn't been that tool or that vessel for me. Um, so it is really important to me for those reasons.
Oh, that makes a lot of
And
sense because I mean it's very evident how important quizzing is to you and how much it means to you and what you pour into it now.
so I'm very thankful that the Continos like made a place for me to coach right away. In as soon as I was done with quizzing, I started coaching immediately. Um, and we had really fantastic growth in our quiz program that year. I mean, the previous year we had three quizzers, and then when I started coaching, we did a lot of promo and ended up just having. We went from having me quizzing experience with another church and having an intermediate team to we had five intermediate teams in the experience team.
Hmm.
And just like overnight, it kind of exploded. And so um, they put a lot of trust and faith in me and not just managing my own team, but they kind of told me like they wanted me to help manage all of the intermediate teams and like decide who was working with who and which teams were going to be which teams and who would coach them, which was at 19 was a
Yeah.
lot of responsibility. But over time, I feel like I grew into that, and I have always been a very intense and competitive person. Um, sometimes a little too intense and a little too competitive, but I feel like my reasons are always good. Um, my reasoning is that I want people to, be their best and um, to show what they can do and just to have the best growth and development spiritually and in quizzing that they can. Interestingly, I feel like people think that in my job I'm as intense as I am with quizzing, and I'm really not.
So
Um,
tell people what you do for people that
I,
don't know.
I'm a teacher. I teach sixth grade English, and I think people think that I'm just as intense with my students as I am with quizzing. I'm not sure that I would still have a job if I wasn't as intense with my students as I am with quizzing. But I definitely take very different approaches to my quizzing world versus my um, professional world. But I do think that there's some things that blend and carry over very well from one piece to the other. Um, I don't know that anyone has, besides me, has ever brought down a contest about phonemes, which are the smallest unit of sound, and morphemes, which
Uh,
are the smallest units of sound that carry meaning. I don't know that anyone else has done that besides me, and thanks to my job for that. Um, but I really enjoy coaching. Like you mentioned earlier, I coach Nick and Ben um, Contino, which uh, they're very different individuals. Sometimes I think people think family members are exactly the same. And so working with them, um, I almost feel like I need to apologize to them because they were kind of my guinea pig quizzers, to
Uh,
see what worked and what didn't, and figuring out like my own style as a coach, and like how to work with people whose personalities were very different from mine because they're both very different from me, um, in the way that they approach quizzing. Not that it's wrong, it's just different. And I had a hard time with, well, what do you mean you're going to approach this differently than me? No, you're going to do it my way. Um, and I still have things that I expect from my quizzers. Like they know if I ask them what's the thing I always say, their response is every verse every day. They know that's my mantra. Um,
Yeah, see,
but
you expect a lot more than my quizzers heard what you expect out of your quizzers, and they were just like, "I love you, Phil. Don't ever leave us." Um,
I don't expect anything more than I expected of myself, though. And that's what I was like, I expect about half as much from you as I expected from myself.
I
Um,
expect a
I
lot more from my kids than I expected of myself when I was a
I
quizzer.
my last couple of years leading into big tournaments like Extrava, state, and nationals, I legitimately studied between 7 and 8 hours a day.
Wow, that's
Um,
awesome.
I I have my kids alternate the orders, and like if they quote in order or out of order or by verse. I did all three every day. I quoted in order, quoted out of order, quoted by verse. I charted like up through 10 time words, which I don't even know why I did that. I think that was unnecessary. Um, I did everything, and most of which, like also quizzers, you are very lucky that those 1, 2, 3 time cards are a thing, because we had to make our own, and that took a long time. I like have vivid memories of running out of note cards and like cutting the like 10 that I had left into these little tiny pieces. I was like, I'm out of note cards, and I'm like these little tiny like pieces of note cards that I'm writing like 1 time words on. Um, but also, cards for your 1, 2, and 3 time words, or however many times things that you're charting. Cards are the way to go.
They
Don't
are.
just look at a list. Make cards for yourself. Also, I feel like you learn while you're making cards for yourself and while you're doing the charting work yourself. You're retaining as you're doing that. But like I said, I don't expect anywhere near as much from my quizzers as I did from myself. But I also knew that, like, for me, I had some quizzing ability, but I also knew that like the level of ability that I had wasn't the same as somebody else. And I knew that if I wanted to compete with them, I had to work harder than they did. And I've kind of told my quizzers the same thing. They're talented, but I think there's other people that, and this is not a good or a bad thing. It's just the way it is. Some people, it's easier for some people than it is for others.
And that's not just quizzing. That's literally
Right. That's life.
anything. Yeah.
Hmm.
I mean, dude, that's I
Um,
always go to basketball, but like,
right.
some people are just born able to shoot a basketball and jump and
Mhm.
run and dribble, and some people, and I was not born talented at all. I loved basketball and worked my butt off to be okay at it, But it's the ones that are super successful are the ones that are born with it and put in
Right.
the work. So you
And
can
have
be
have both.
right.
So I've told my kids that, like, okay, you're both gifted, you have that ability, but you're not so gifted that you can't work hard.
Exactly. That's
You
very
have to
true.
work this little bit harder than, say, this person or that person. And that's no slight on them. Their brain just works in a way that certain things come more easily to them. And that's awesome for that person. We're not going to hold it against them. But we're also, in order to be able to compete and to be able to do our best, part of that is that doing that extra work. And I'm Andrew and Ben, if I ask them to do something as far as like studying and working hard and trying something new, they do it without question.
That's awesome.
So that hasn't always been the case for people I've worked with, but Andrew and Ben, like, they don't always love doing it, but they do it. So they know that most of the time I'm right. Um, as far as like studying and like what you need to do to be able to do your best, and that's we had a conversation the other day as a team about, um, like, and I was telling them how thankful I am that they do those things, and they were trying to like put the accolades back on me, and I was like, no, it's like I can tell you what to do, and I can give you all the instruction in the world, but what you do with it is what matters.
Right.
So they like I I can't go up there and quiz for you.
Right.
I can't do as much as I would like to sometimes. I can't. Um, so I that's kind of my story, I guess.
Well, that was awesome. I learned a lot, and we're good friends. um, I do love how much you love quizzing, how much you pour into it, and I mean, that's awesome that you're blessed with the kind of kids um, that will do whatever you say. I will say one thing that I noticed about you that sold me on you as a coach, because
Mm-hmm.
getting to know you, I was like, man, this guy's intense, and man, he does a lot. Andrew's mom, like, just loves you and adores you, and just thinks the world of you. And when a parent, when you're a kid's coach, if the parent like adores you, I think that says a lot. That they appreciate all the work that you do, and they see all the work that you do, which parents see a lot more than church members and
Right.
other quizzing coordinators. So how a parent feels about a coach says a lot, in my opinion. Um, and so hearing her talk about you and just go on and on about how much you do for Andrew and about how much you do for the kids, that's when you know that you genuinely work your butt off, and you do
They're
a
kind
great
of
job.
like my second family. So
Me too. I always,
people asked if we were related. People, Mr. Barley asked if we were related last weekend, and I was like, no, we're not. We claim each other, but we're not related. Like, I
I
told her she was my second mom the other day, and she was like, I'm not old enough for that. I was like, actually, you are, but
y'all's relationship's great.
uh,
um, well,
people don't get it, but we get it. So,
is there oh, and I was really glad that a couple years ago we both got a runner-up coach of the year together,
yeah.
which was really cool. I really that was a great year for you guys. That was kind of y'all's coming out party where you guys
Mm-hmm.
quizzed amazing that year, and you have been quizzing at a high level ever since. Um, it's gonna be a really good year this year. There's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of really good teams.
Yeah.
Interesting to see what our extrav's gonna look like. So
Mm-hmm.
last year, the North Central extrav was at your church,
Yes, it was.
which
Mm-hmm.
you guys. Okay, so I compared it to this. You remember when the Olympics was in China and the opening
Mm-hmm.
ceremony was like insanely good, and
Mm-hmm.
London was sitting there and they're like, "Oh my gosh, we have to do this in 2 years." That's how I felt last year at BQE, because I was like, "Oh my
Hopefully, the air
gosh."
quality was better at our church than in
Uh,
China.
yeah, okay. We're not gonna talk about China, but last year, the way you guys handled everything, how beautiful your church is, the organization of the tournament, and just how you guys went above and beyond. And the rally, the Friday night rally, was fantastic, and the preaching was fantastic. And I was just like, man, we've got a high bar set for us. Thanks a lot, guys. So but we're hoping to have a wonderful extrav. If you guys are in North Central area and you're not thinking about going to an extrav, please go to extrav.
We
It is so good. It's so worth it. I mean, extrav is like my second favorite week of the year,
after
besides
nationals.
after nationals. Um, uh, I you are one that really loves nationals. You just you just have the
Oh, I
ability
don't
to
think I sleep most of the
yeah,
time.
I know. I think you just have the ability to stay up all night during nationals for
But
some
also,
reason.
I haven't been working for 2 months before that.
Ah, that's it.
Remember, I've
That's
been
true.
off for like 8 weeks of work before, so
So,
I've got all this sleep stored up.
do you think being a teacher has helped you as a coach?
I think so. Um, I think it's helped me to like understand working with different kids with different personalities and people coming from different backgrounds that don't necessarily think the same way that I do. I think I've brought some of like the things that I do at work over into how I run practices. Um, like for example, this year I used at work I'm teaching English, so one of the things that we do is we keep a reader's notebook, and so I brought like that over into quizzing. So this year we tried um, keeping like a quizzing notebook with like a spot for quizzers to write down like their thoughts as they're studying, um, and like a spot for them to put in like any like resources or things from me that I want them to look at. Um, and a, a, the most important thing I think there too is that we put in a spot for like vocabulary and language work. Um, that so much of the concepts and the language we come across in King James English is unfamiliar for a lot of our students as in just the meanings of the words themselves. So I wanted to really support that vocabulary development as well, because I think that will aid in their overall understanding. And so we'll often like when we come back to practice the next week, and we don't do this all the time, but occasionally at practice, like we'll start or conclude practice like all together with I've got 6 quizzers this year. I've got 3 teams. Um, so we'll come all back together at the end or at the beginning of practice and just share out like, okay, let's talk about like what's a question you had in as you were studying this week, and they should have it right there in their notebook. Or like, okay, what's some interesting like vocabulary that you came across, or words that you struggled with, or phrasing that you struggled with, and let's talk through it together. So then it's not just benefiting the one quizzer, but it's benefiting all of them. And especially for Andrew and Ben, who may be further ahead and in their study than some of my other kids, it'll make it easier when the other kids get to that point.
Right. That's really
So
good.
that's something I've pulled over this year, and it hasn't been perfect, but it definitely I think has had an impact.
If you had one recommendation for like a newer coach when it comes to like running practices, is there anything that you would think is like the number one that you'd
Well, I think
recommend?
one number one like a mistake that I see people make is when because you're going to have it's just the way it is. You're going to have one quizzer who is more of a standout than the others. So I think a mistake that just initially because they have that initial like they have the talent or they have the drive or whatever, it comes more easily to them from the get-go. What I see sometimes new coaches do is they try to hold that quizzer back to get the other ones to the same point that that person is, and so they stop that quizzer's development in their skills, but I think also in their material. So doing things like don't if you've got 10 kids that are lagging behind and one who's at where they need to be, don't push back what you're quizzing over in practice to what those other people are doing, because you're just rewarding them not working
Right.
and you're hurting the person who is putting in the work.
Right.
So that's the thing, a mistake I see newer coaches make a lot. Or they'll do things like, okay, don't interrupt and give the other ones a chance to do that. Instead of doing that, do things a little more individually.
Right.
Break out and work on it. And I know that we don't always have the amount of adults to do that, but we can do it in different ways. If you have 6 quizzers and 2 adults, you can have one adult running like a quiz practice, like over actual questions to work on skills with whoever that is, and you can rotate the other ones in and out, and do like have them like if you're behind a material or if they need to work on some charting or whatever that is, you can do different like rotations and stations where okay, you're going to go over to this room and work with adult B on this thing while I as adult A am working with the these 4 quizzers on this quizzing skill, and then you flip. And so those couple of quizzers that have some more novice beginnery kind of things they need to work on, if it's understanding the rules or pushing themselves a little further in material or goal setting. I think if you have, as long as you have 2 adults, you can make it work.
Right. I would agree. I would agree.
So that would be my biggest thing I would tell people.
Well, thank you for all that you do
Yeah,
for
sure.
quizzing and for your kids. I know it's getting late and you teach and you get up super early in the morning, so we're going to get this wrapped up.
All right.
Is there anything else you want to share or say before we sign off? I mean, what does quizzing mean to you?
Okay. I think that quizzing, um, I think it means to me one, it was a way for me to get connected to God. Two, it made me feel more connected to the church. Not the physical buildings of the church, but the people that are in church. And um, I think that quizzing has allowed me to embrace other people's perspectives and to be more loving.
Well, good. Maybe we can do another podcast talk about all your quizzing pet peeves.
Oh, no, there aren't that many.
No, there really isn't. I'm
No,
thinking. No,
it's
we
things like answering questions out of order and making your like out of senior questions and vice versa.
well, you are a fantastic coach and a good friend,
Thank you.
and
So are you.
I'm looking forward to hanging with you at BQE in
Yeah.
6 weeks. Wait,
5.
5-ish weeks, a little more than 5 weeks. So, once again, for everybody, go to BQE. It's gonna be awesome.
Please do.
I'm really excited about it. So
More teams, more of us qualifying for nationals at BQE.
exactly. I hope we get 20.
Show up.
Please show up.
Not selfish reasons at all.
Well, you have a good night and enjoy teaching school tomorrow, and we'll talk to you later.
All right.